everyone, and welcome to another episode of Why People Do What They Do, where we speak to talented and accomplished individuals from various fields. We took a little bit of a hiatus, but today we are back, and I'm so glad to introduce our guest for today, Freda Liu. Hi, Freda. Thank you so much for being on the show with us.
Thanks, Jacqueline. It's a pleasure. Good to see you again after a hiatus.
Freda, you're a broadcast journalist, MC, moderator, trainer, and author of 7 books. You're basically an all-round communicator, right? So we hear your voice on the radio. We see you doing so many great things, which we will get into in a bit. But first, Freda, tell us, we want to get to know about you, your childhood, and your background.
Okay, we're gonna go back a long way. Childhood. So I was born in Brunei. My father worked for Shell, and that's what everybody was doing there in the little country. So I grew up there until I was 14 years old. Then my parents are Sarawakians, and my father retired. So then I went back to Sarawak. And there you have it. Now after that, when I was in Sarawak for about 4 or 5 years, why is there a sound? 4 or 5 years, and then I came back to Kuala Lumpur to study, and then came to Kuala Lumpur to study, went to Australia for a year, and then got my career in public relations, my first job. But before I went over to my further studies as well, I took a year and was a receptionist at the Kuching Hilton. So that was my first job because it looked so glamorous from the outside, but it's not. When you're not staying in a hotel and you're working, is two different things.
How did you end up in Kuching Hilton, and how old were you back then?
I was 17.
Right,
17.
okay.
So like you finished school and
After
everything.
SPM.
No, I didn't do SPM. I did some O levels. It wasn't a private school, but it's what we call a missionary school. Sorry, it is a private school, but not the glam international school. You know how it is in Sarawak. So we had a lot of missionary schools. So I did that because studying in Brunei, I was studying in an English medium, and so when I went over, I didn't want to study in BM, right? Of course, BM was one subject, but I didn't study fully in BM, so that's why I went on that track. So yes, that's the
Was it
story.
always the plan to go back to Sarawak, or were you sad when you left, or you always wanted to live in Brunei and build a life there?
Oh, okay, that story, right? And this is where you look at life and you realize why. So imagine, right, this is the life you've lived. This is the country you're born in. And you think this is going to be the rest of your life, right? I mean, that's it. It's a very small town, but, it's a great growing up town, right? Because my father basically worked 5 minutes from where we live, right? And there's no traffic in this really small town.
Very different from KL.
Called Syria, called Kuala Blight, right? So where my dad worked. So we would I had a quality life, as in my dad will be home, he starts work at 7:00, he's back by 4. And he's home by 4:15. So we got the evening together. And so I had a lot of that family time. So to leave Brunei to what I would own, the only place I know is home, was very, and then you're a teenager, you make your friends, and then you go halfway, and then not even starting in secondary school, you're starting in the middle of secondary school. So I didn't like going back. I didn't like, this is not the life I had planned, right? And the thing is, my dad was also given an early retirement, so he could actually work a little bit further, and I would have finished my 5th form, but such is fate that I had to go back earlier. And also such is fate is that everybody in my family has permanent resident status. So that's my parents, and I've got 3 older siblings. They all had the permanent residence except me. So the door was always closed for me to go back there, right?
Just somehow, circumstance.
Right? And of course you feel sad, but then you take a couple of decades later and it's like, no wonder that door. You understand now why certain doors are closed, right? And then you realize that, okay lah, it's a very different Brunei now than the one I grew up in, right? I still love the place. I haven't been back recently. There's no one there now. My sister just came back. So yeah, that was it. So yeah, it was sad. And when you're 14, that's your world. That's all you've ever known. But as you grow older, you realize different things.
So when you were growing up, Freda, what did you plan to be when you grow up? Like, did you always plan to go into hotel management? Is that why you wanted some hands-on time in Kuching Hilton?
So when you're young, everybody tells you you want to be a doctor, right? It sounds so, but actually, you know that it's not your calling anyway. Then I wanted to go into hotel management, right? And I thought, okay, why don't I go into hotel management, take up, but see what, and it was also like figuring out what I wanted to study, right? And my parents are not rich, right? So, but okay, let me work, see what it's like, just research some colleges. Back in the day, when I got into Help College, let me tell you, Help College just started. It's not the Help College you know right now, right? And it was the cheapest place I could find in terms of trying to find that kind of education, because I don't have Malaysian education in that sense, so I can't even think about the local university path. Then you say, okay, maybe I do hotel management. And during that period, I realized that I wanted to do a degree in marketing, because um, it's like every hotel, every industry needs marketing, right? Every industry marketing. So I don't know what I want to do. Let's just do a generic degree. I cannot do accounting. I know that I would probably, if I so back in the day, marketing was quite radical already, but so then I did marketing, not knowing what I want to do. Then when I was at university, the two subjects that I did really well was in advertising and public relations. I said, okay, it's a sign. Okay, read the signs, right? I didn't go into advertising because it was when you're in advertising, you're either account servicing, you're either creative, you're either that kind of thing, right? Whereas in PR, you're the one who get the client's brief, you're the one who ends up doing the proposal, you're the one doing the execution, you're the one doing the writing. So I said, it's more, I get to do the gamut of things that I want to do, right? So that's why, and it was a fairly new industry back then. So that's why I got into Edelman, which is a PR consultancy, and it was just like accidentally, like, okay, I mean, not accidentally, that was quite planned. Like, I want to go into PR. This is the path. This is my life.
Yeah. But I find it interesting, Freda, that even before you started working, you knew what kind of agency you wanted to go into, an agency role that you wanted to go into, because more often than not, we would only find out the nature of the job. Everybody wants to go into agency to try out because it's so creative and so fun, right? When you watch series like Mad Men, they're like, oh, I want to work in an advertising agency, I want to work in a PR agency. But not many people would know the nuts and bolts of the mechanics of working in these agencies. So how do you actually know that, okay, if I work in a PR agency, I would, go through the whole gamut of all the facets of the job, compared to if I go to an advertising agency, I would either be in a creative role or a very, in a suit role. They call it the suits, right? Yeah. So how do you know?
I think it was because it was a fairly new industry. I think even then, right, when you go into an industry, it was like I would do PR work for property, for tech, for pharmaceuticals, right? I think right now the industry a bit more sophisticated. They already put you in verticals. They already put you in, okay, you're going to take care of healthcare, you're going to take consumer, you're going to do that. So I guess at the time it's a fairly new industry, so you could experiment with different kinds of industries, right? So back then you do your research. You do your research. What's advertising like? You talk to people, oh, it's like this, it's like this, like this. And it was a bit more sophisticated industry as compared to PR at that time. It was, so that's why I said, okay, I want to try every industry, see what's interesting. And then you learn that the principles are the same in communications, but of course you learn about the different industries, and that was the reason. And I think that's it, right? I even like what I do in terms of radio and all that, right? I like the variety of people I meet, right? I like the variety of industries, right? So I can learn about so many things. And I think that is you ask me what's a common factor in my life. I'm very curious, and I want to learn about new things and different things and how things work, right? So but that was the reason why I went to PR, because I knew that there was going to be more variety. And this is 30 years ago, right? So it was a very different industry to what you would get now. Yeah.
Did your parents play a role in in your career choice or what you studied in university?
No, they were very supportive of whatever I wanted to do. They are not very educated themselves, and I think because being the youngest child, they had gotten tired of parenting. So by the fourth child, you do whatever you want. So I didn't get in trouble or anything like that. So I was, in that sense, I'm very blessed. But I have to say that my mother was the one who always say, get your education, right? And we trust you to do whatever you wanted to do and all that, and like, which is good and bad, right? Because I couldn't go to my parents for advice because they didn't know enough to advise. And back then, we got such a thing as career counseling and all that, right? So you just sort of do your research. Life before the internet, you read, you find books, you find newspapers, and every Saturday I would buy the Star newspaper because they're the thickest, and then you get as much information. And then when you buy the newspaper from Sarawak on Saturday, the papers cost more in Sarawak, right? But this was the kind of research you had to do. So it was a very different. So my parents, they were very supportive in terms of what I want to do, but again, not that well off, right? But yeah, so they, I'm glad they just sort of like, my mom would say, "La Frida will know what to do." So that assurance she gave me, and I say it's also very radical because at that time, like most mothers, are not that what not that they're not supportive, but so growing up, I never had boys should do this, girls should do this conversation, right?
Okay.
So that already in itself, that it's only when you start going to work you hear things about gender equality, things are different for girls and boys, right? So I never had that disparity of what a guy or a girl can do growing up, and that makes a lot of difference.
Do you think it's because of your upbringing? So it's within your family values? So do you think it's a Brunei and Sarawak, it's a upbringing in Sarawak per se? Or was it your parents that were very...
A bit of nature nurture, right? I think I've always been very driven, right? I've always been very driven. I've always been very curious. I always like to, like, learn, that kind of thing. So, so a lot of that is nature, but also nurture. I knew that, like, I don't think right now y- it's too slow for me. Some places are too slow for me. So I, obviously had to get out to bigger towns or bigger cities to find work and all that. But yeah, so it's a bit of that, right? Nature and nurture. Yeah.
The reason I ask it, I think it actually makes a lot of difference, the kind of values and mindset that you set in a child early on,
Right.
and the upbringing, because then even when they grow up and they try to unlearn certain things, it's still stuck in their subconscious mind. So it's very interesting that you mentioned that you never had to, you were never confined in a box of like, oh, a girl should do this and this is only a man's world
Yeah.
in terms of certain industries or practices. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think like even growing up, right, I've always been in a co-ed school, right?
Right.
So I think that makes a difference, So I can never imagine being, yeah. And if I went back to Sarawak, I got accepted into a local school, which is a very good school, but it was a girls' school. I said, "Man, I don't want to be in a girls' school. I'm so used to co-ed, right?" So, but yeah, so all these things come to play. And when I was growing up in that school, it was a missionary school, and it was still, so Brunei at that time was not independent. So we had a lot of, uh, you- British soldiers, right? And their wives were teachers. And also, and my classmates were from Gurkhas to Brits to Filipinos to what, and like I say, it's not an international school, right? It's just that was the way it was. And then so I got to meet with all these different people growing up, but and it was good education. So to me, I really enjoyed my time growing up and getting the basis of that education in Brunei. I feel that was really helped me, language and all that. Yeah.
And when you moved out of Kuching to go to Edelman PR, how was it like? Was there any culture shock for you
Uh,
or...
okay, so at that time already, I had come to KL to study under help. So I already was working. I was already studying here.
Okay.
So I already, know the life,
Accustomed,
the
okay.
custom. Then I went to Australia for 1 year. I went to
Right.
Australia for 1 year. Then I came back. So I'm familiar to KL already at that time. I like the energy, the pace. I think at that time I was like, do I want to work in Brunei? Do I want to work in Malaysia? Or do I want to work in Singapore? Right. So I decided on Malaysia in the end because the exchange rate wasn't what it is now. Should I? But yeah. So it was that was more the decision. So I was used to KL already, so it's
Right.
not so much a culture shock. But of course, first time working in like it's very different when you're working in Kuching in the hotel as a receptionist, right? And after you've graduated, working corporate job is different in that sense. More that.
Freda, now I want to talk to you about your interesting crossover career, right? A conventional media and communications crossover career would normally be from media to communication. So, for instance, for me, I went into an agency role in public relations after a short stint in media. For you, you went from being in an agency role in Edelman in PR to an in-house role and then to being a broadcast journalist. and a media personality. Was this all meticulously planned, or was this all very serendipitous and accidental?
Very serendipitous and very accidental, but also I always believe in the divine. Okay, I always believe. I'll start off with saying that sometimes when when you're young, look at the things that you're naturally interested in, and naturally things that you are gifted in, right? And I've always loved debates. I've always loved that whole thing, right? But I never thought of journalism as a career or TV as a career. I got into TV by accident, and I'll give you. So we've got time, and I'll give you the long story. Like it's in my book,
Yes,
but I'll give you the
please.
story. I'll give you the story. So I finished my studies in Australia. My father was very ill, and I had to come back and take care of my dad. When I was taking care of him, a friend of mine told me, say, hey, RTM Kuching is looking for something. I don't know what they're looking for. I said, well, I'm taking care of my dad. Then I took care of my dad. Then my dad was then my dad passed, right? So a couple of months again, my friend was saying, they're still looking for somebody. I said, what is it that you're looking for so long? So then she introduced me to the producer of the show. I didn't know who it was. We were not even an audition. We were just chatting. And then she was saying, okay lah. Then after that, my friend told me, oh, you've got the job. I said, okay, whatever. I mean, whatever. I already had my mind that I want to go into PR, right? So whatever. So then I realized that it was a live TV show, and it was a live TV show and live before Astro, when people actually sat down and watched terrestrial TV, that they combined with now is Media Corp, but what was once called Singapore Broadcasting Corporation, SBC. So every 2 years they have a variety show, and so I think it must be like Singapore and then RTM, right? And RTM is all over the world, all over Malaysia. And that year it happened to be in RTM Kuching. And so they had a male host that was the late Tamimi Srega, and he was the male host speaking in Malay, and I was the female host speaking in English. And I think RTM Kuching would want the host to be a Sarawakian. So, right? So it like what I think they just say, okay, this girl can speak English, right? Okay, so anyway, I'm like, huh? I'm on live TV in 2 countries, no experience, no whatever. So anyway, I did the show. I still don't want to do this as a career.
Why
But
not, though?
no, just I think if I would have gone into journalism. And the reason I didn't go into journalism was because journalists not paid very well. You know that
Okay.
the whole thing, right? So I didn't go into journalism. And then if I had wanted to go into journalism, then I would say, oh, I might as well go to the CNNs, go to Hong Kong, go to Singapore, whatever. So that
Right.
wasn't on my mind. Anyway, so then the late Saleh Pateh Ahir, who was the second man in RTM, because the heads of both the stations were there because it's government relations. So that's how I got discovered. And so and I decided to move to KL and everything. Then after that, he was so kind. He got me an audition in Kuching. He says, if you ever come to KL, you've got a job reading the news here. And I said, I don't want to do this full time. I want to do this part time only. No. So the whole thing from November till the next, he was always in touch with me. When I got back in KL, settled with my job at Edelman, then I told him, Encik Saleh, I'm in KL. And I got into TV news, right? So TV and radio news. And that's the thing, right? I never gave up on that part-time element while working the corporate job. It wasn't the money because it wasn't, you don't get paid very well, but I never lost touch of broadcasting while I was doing my job in Edelman, while working in IBM. That was always a part-time thing. So when BFM came about, the first thing I asked them was, where are you located? Because I'm very comfortable in my Taman Tun Bandar Utama area. And they say there's a station that's an independent business station that's starting there. And at that point in my life, my career, I was already 11 years in IBM. It was a great company, but I wanted to change, right? And it was a pay cut. It was a pay cut, but it was just something different that I could do business. And it wasn't just, like a radio host and music and everything. There is music, but it was more intellectual. And worst case is like, I can always go back to PR lah, right? Because of that experience. So then after that, I took on the role with a 30% pay cut. And who knew, 15 years later, I stayed on. But it's always been so interesting. And I think that was the first time I did broadcasting full time. Right? That was the first time. That's why people always say, right? You go agency, then you want to go in house because you get paid better and everything, right? But my life is the other way around. Into a pay
That's right. Yeah.
But it was a risk I took. So, but okay. So the fact that there was a station like BFM, right? That was talk radio, which was quite new at that time, and business. Who knew that there would be a station like that? right? Who knew that there would be something like this that combined both my corporate experience and both my broadcasting experience? Who knew when I decided to continue with all these two things, right? So a bit of serendipity, a bit of planning, a bit of, not staying, not losing touch, and something. Sometimes that's why in life, right, you just got to be prepared, and you never know that something will come along the way, right? And that you can start, uh, you know, uh, you can start with something new, right? So you don't know, right? And it's just, and I continue doing all these things because they just interest me, right? And who knew, lah? So yeah.
So knowing what you know now, and doing the whole gamut of journalism, PR, working with clients, talking to different people from various industries. I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but which one do you prefer? Do you prefer PR? Do you prefer media?
Oh, okay. I think I prefer. No, wow. I love communicating, right?
Yeah.
I think what PR does is that it has its role. A lot of companies don't know how to tell their story. And I think that helps me as well when I do my interviews, and let me try to get that story out of you, right? I'm also, in the end, when I'm doing my interviews, I am imagining the news release headline, right?
Right,
You're so,
because you have the background, but
yeah,
not many journalists would know how to
right.
think in that
Yes.
process, because they've never had to plan for the client and write their
Yeah.
bullet points in their briefing books and things like that, right?
So, but I enjoy radio. Okay, I mean, I enjoy radio, and I enjoy radio the way the show that has been done, right? Where I get to talk to every day. I'm learning something new, right? Isn't that exciting? Every day you're learning something new about a different industry, about how the world operates. And I'm just thinking, like, well, if I was in my previous job, right? You'd be your usual lah, you'll be in corporate and everything, and your life is just tech. Nothing wrong with that. That's the future. But then you don't see other aspects of life. So I think for that excitement, I really love radio. Not radio per se, but the shows that we cover, right? So if I can, and how it's changed right now, right? You don't really even need to start a radio station. You start a podcast like yourself, right? There's so many avenues right now from 30 years, from what it was 30 years ago. But anyway, I think that is what excites me. Whether I enjoy radio because also, how can you tell a story just with your voice without visuals, right? How do you capture someone's attention and imagination with just audio? And when you've mastered that, visuals then it becomes easier when you have visuals, right? It adds on already. But then if you've mastered that just with audio, everything else is an add-on.
Right. So BFM 89.9 for 14 years. Right now, you're a contributor with
Yeah.
BFM. So tell us about the experience and also how things have changed from when you started 14 years ago with them, and versus the present moment.
Okay, now I'm contributing with a women's show, which is something that I actually started. I thought we needed a show about women in leadership and influence and beyond business, right? I wanted to do that show because when you see it, you will believe it, right? So I want to interview women in space, women in comedy, women in sports, women in, of course, in corporate jobs as well, breaking the glass ceiling and all that. But beyond that, the Heidi Kwas working with the refugees, to me, that's women of influence and leadership, right? So that was the reason why I wanted to do that. And I think a very simple example, Tan Sri Michelle Yeoh, suddenly you see this Asian 60-year-old Malaysian breaking that. And when you see that this person can do it, a lot of Malaysians say, I can do it now too, right? I mean, because so that was the reason I started doing the show. So it's changed, not with the things that we cover. I mean, it's like so interesting. I interviewed My Taxi when it first started, right? And of course now they're Grab and all over. But to see that story of how they've come, and that's where PR comes in, right? How they've continued with that story and built that story and built that brand. So so it's changed, and the platforms have changed. We cannot be radio alone, right? We cannot say this radio station is a competitor, that radio station is not a competitor. Anything that captures anyone else's attention is a competitor. TikTok is a competitor, right? Whatever, right? Whatever takes your attention right now is your competitor. So that's how the industry has evolved. How do you continue to be in top of mind? and having to be present, right? So we right now, of course, if you go to BFM, it's not just radio. It's got to be supported by, of course, we've always had podcasts, but supported by TikTok, supported by Instagram, supported by all these elements that have to come into play right now, and that's the future, right? And also, if you look at so I took a course as a futurist a few years ago, and every company will be a content create, it will be a media company, right? And what I guess they mean is that they'll be coming up with their own content, they'll be coming up with their own things. So that is competition, right? So that's the future. And if you understand that, back then I have to be with this station, I have to be with this, but I can create my own content now. So that's how things have changed, right? And you got to continue to be relevant, supporting them. So, for example, even people who advertise with BFM, right? Do we want to support you with events as well? Do we want to? So it's, so then we will have events where I moderate, right? Where moderation is a different skill from a radio presenter skill. But these are things that you have to change and evolve and learn and be current and be relevant, right? So, and I think that's the same for every industry, right? And, every industry you have to grow and change, and no, don't expect things to be the same. Used to be 30 years ago. Don't expect things to be same in 1 year's time. Right? You just always have to put your feelers out there. Things are going to change, right? AI, chat GPT, how's it going to affect your work, right? So in that sense, it's change. Whether everything AI now, do they need a real radio presenter, or can they just
That's
put a
right.
voice
Yeah.
out there, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 14 years ago, Freda, were you one of the
Yes.
first members of BFM?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So
14 and
how
a half years ago, yeah. One of the first, I joined 3 months after,
right?
because
Okay.
they started in September and I joined in January the next year because of the 30% pay cut. And I told Malik Ali, I said, I got my 13-month bonus due in December. Let me stay on until then. And then I'll join you. So I joined in January. So, but yeah, one of the earlier furniture, one of the earlier furniture pieces.
Do you remember your first interview on the
Yes.
radio station?
Oh, my first interview. Who did I interview? It was scary. But I know I think like within the first week I spoke to Tony Pua.
Oh,
So that was the thing, and I started off with the morning show, the Breakfast Grill, before I joined Enterprise. So that was my first foray. I can't remember who the first person was, who my poor first victim was. No,
were you
so
nervous? Was that your
of
first
course.
talk show?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, of course. And then you had every question line up and everything, and then it was like, okay, I don't know how to ask anymore. Then after that, then you learn to have conversations, and you get into it. Of course, everything, and that was one thing I wanted to be comfortable with, because when you're reading a news, everything is scripted.
Yep.
So you want to learn how to be on the fly, yet communicative, and of course listening skills and all that. And that was a reason a skill I wanted to brush up on, to be more conversational. And that was radio gave me that. But after a while, the script, it can be very short, because sometimes the answer the interviewer say yes no, right? How
What's the follow-up question?
first of all, the question to yes no. So that's what you learn along the way.
Right. How about your most memorable one?
So many memorable ones, right? I mean, there are people that, I mean, like big, and I'm not being politically correct. Every interview I've done, I feel I've learned something, right? And, you just add some more to the the neuro thingy. But of course, memorable for me would be Nick Wojcik. He came to the studio and everything. There is you just, when he starts talking, I just started crying. He's not saying anything that I haven't heard before, but he was just very, no arms, no legs, but yet so much of a person, right? So much of a personality, his energy, everything. You could feel that. And he was really, really memorable, not during the interview, memorable after the interview, where he had a conversation with me. And there's a YouTube link I can send you, where he prayed for me after we finished, and that was recorded. And then I've still got it. Every time I cannot look at it. Every time I look at it, I cry. But yeah, so that was, to me, he's very memorable. He's very personable, and that was it.
Freda, you're not only a broadcast journalist, right? I mean, in our intro, we talked about how you're an MC, moderator. It takes different skill sets. You're also an author, right? So if you could scale it down to, really boil it down to, what do you really love most about your job as a communicator, as a
Wow.
journalist, right? What is it that you love most about your job?
I think one of the things that I am the probably okay, you can hear there's something going on my roof. The storytellers, the storyteller. You know what I mean? I
Mm,
think there's one thing that, I think I love being able to get the stories out of people, right?
mm,
I find that that's, sometimes it's selfish, like it's more for me, that learning everything. But I feel that that is the ultimate for me,
mm,
getting that story out, whether it was in PR or whether it's in doing my interviews or even writing my story, even writing, right? I'm also an adjunct professor as well at UNITA. So I know a chance to speak to students, but just to get that story out there. And I think everyone's got a story. We have to get better at it. If you talk about it from a marketing perspective, right? We've got great Malaysian stories, but we're not very good at telling our stories. We're not very good at marketing, right?
mm,
Singapore is very good at marketing. That's why you think, they're the center of hawkers, and they're so good at marketing themselves, right? That we got to learn from that. So a little bit of that marketing, but they're very good at storytelling.
mm,
So I find that that is one thing that I enjoy getting out of people, but something also a skill that we can all improve on.
mm. That's true. What is your daily routine like? You're doing so many things, right? Like, even before we started this chat, you have so many projects lined up on top of
Yeah.
the things that you're already doing. So how do you stay productive, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think you always have to start the day with exercise.
Mm.
That's important,
So
right?
you're
That
you exercise in the morning. You don't exercise at night. Oh, that's
worst case, if I've got events in the morning, then I'll come back
mm,
at night, walk around my neighborhood and do a five kilometer walk, that kind of thing. Just
mm,
that takes an hour, right? But I believe that exercise is important. That you got to start the day, and fresh. And then I don't wear any gadgets. I don't do anything. I just walk and look and think and that kind of thing, right? So I think
mm.
that's important.
Do you wake up very early? Are you the sort of
Uh,
person that wake up at
I
5
am a
a.m.?
morning. No, no, no. I'm only, no. I realized that it's 7 hours, 7.5 hours is the perfect one for me. So, ideally, which I don't, but 12. I'll sleep at 12 and I'll wake up about 6:30, 7 kind of thing. But I will do that. I'll walk in the morning and before I start the day. I do a lot of planning and all that. So the couple of projects, right? So what's my typical day now? Very hard to say. My typical. I'll tell you about the projects I'm working on, right?
Mm,
And I've got where's my book? My calendar, which I realized I've got to do. My calendar of things I need to do. So I write down, and it's very fulfilling when you strike it out. Okay, I've done this. I've done this. The couple of projects I'm working on right now, I've started a show. I'm doing a course, a 6-week course in sustainability. Um,
nice.
and then so after our conversation, I got to do some studying, and I love that. I love studying. Can you hear the knocking?
A little
Yes,
bit, but
a
it's
little
okay.
bit. Okay, it's
Yeah, it's
okay. Yeah.
okay.
So my roof, as we're talking right now, my solar roof is being done. Saving towards
Very on point for
energy.
sustainability.
My point on sustainability. I've also started a show working on sustainability called The Shift, and the
Mm,
conversation I feel that's necessary because a lot of we hear ESG, we hear sustainability, people don't know how to connect the story. Big companies are doing it, SMEs said we have to do it, but we don't know what to do. So there's a lot of that, and we have to do it, right? We have to do
mm,
it if we want to be competitive globally. So I want to get those stories out around sustainability. I'm working with somebody else to do a show called Triple Shot, a short show on triple shot of like bite-sized information on anything and everything, right?
mm,
Uh, so I've done a couple of recordings for that. So watch this space. So I find that three things. So I interviewed this lady called Regina Rahim, who's just launched her company called Wahine Capital, and she's got this
mm,
thing called a W Vault. So three things you didn't know about death in women, right? Three things. Aaron Sama from Scale Up Malaysia. Three mindset shifts from being a scale up to a startup to a scale up, right? That change. So just different things. So it's going to be short. That's also a video. I've started working on just very early stages with my friend Emily Bana, Dash Dashnamurti, his wife Vani. We've got this thing called Act Two, and this is for people midlifers or people who want to go into entrepreneurship but are afraid, and they're probably a little bit older. I would say like mid
mm,
30s and above, and they want to go into a new act, right? I think the pandemic made people sort of like, what's the meaning and purpose of life? And people are afraid of entrepreneurship, right? And people think that entrepreneurship is only for young people. It's not true, right? But if they are clear about that, this whole program will help them in moving that entrepreneurship journey. So there's studying, there's this show, that show. What else? I was talking to some. What am I? Oh, I'm so busy. So these are the main things that I'm working on at the moment. Involved with as I said, adjunct professor with UNITA. Not a lot of involvement there, but just doing a lot of things like whether it's
Mm.
emceeing or moderating, getting that kind of work involved. So that's your typical day. I want to have more time to think. I think that's
Mm.
important, right? To sort of think and ponder, yeah, and look at your life,
Right.
my wheel of life. What needs to
Yeah.
improve on my spiritual side? What needs to improve on my health? What needs to
Mm.
improve on my career? What needs to improve money? And so these are things that I want to be able to have more time to think about.
Yeah. On that note, on your wheel of life, right? That's something that I found very interesting when I watched your TEDx talk a few years
Mm,
ago, when you
mm,
talked about the wheel of life and how you came to that realization that you have to take better care of yourself
mm.
spiritually. You've got to fill that cup.
Yep.
So tell us about that, and also how do you keep to that discipline, right, of constantly checking in with your wheel of life and the aspects that make up that wheel of life, because it's so easy, right? Like they say that the days are long, but the years are short. So,
Uh-huh.
like, the days, the months, the years just escape us. And sometimes it's just not easy to kind of like grasp what's going on.
Okay.
Mm.
So I do that every year, but then you've got to do your monitoring, your self monitoring. Like maybe once a month, just look and review yourself
Mm.
where you want to go, right? So I try to, because this is a very that example of, if I just spend all my time at work and don't spend time with my friends, right? Then suddenly, when you need your friends, you've never invested in friendships. Why would anyone want to invest their time in you? So, and friendships are investments. It's your commitment, and that's very important for me. Every week, I'll definitely be meeting some friend, at least
Mm.
2 friends a week, right? And that's time together. Or you can do a couple of things together. So this morning I go for my walk. The weekend, then I'll go for a walk with a friend. So it's exercise and conversation. Tomorrow I'm going to church with another friend, and so it's conversation. And then we have lunch together. So that's also spiritual, and you do these things. But you do monitor, like, what sort of goals do you want to spend time spiritually? Whether it's going for a mission trip or just something measurable. Am I reading the Bible every day? I'm not. I probably have to revisit that. But like, spending 15 minutes time alone with God. So these are things that I have to monitor with myself. And I think when you have that spiritual guide, whatever it may be, it also, at the end of the day, you come naked, you leave naked, right? And it's not your work. Of course, you want to leave a legacy in that sense that you made an impact on someone's life. As you get older, you think about significance, right? So I
Mm.
think the spiritual side sort of keeps you on the right track, because it's Freda Liu BFM, it's Freda Liu IBM, it's Freda Liu Edelman, it's Freda Liu RTM, it's Freda Liu, right? And
Mm.
Freda Liu, according to whose measurement is the most important? Public acceptance or God's acceptance,
Mm.
right? It's not in the human world, your social media, how many likes you get, yeah, you gotta be very clear. Um, no, it's not about the amount of likes and followers, right?
Mm.
And it's difficult, especially in this day and age, right? When
Yes.
you get your 200 people like my thing, it went
Mm.
viral, yeah, okay, I know it. So you have to be very clear about that. So I know that's spiritual. Then you look at your health. What's important, right? I got to look at, and it's not just like weight, but it's like visceral fat. You got to monitor yourself. As you get older, you lose more muscle.
Mm.
So women, how do you then measure to get, what do I have to do to achieve whatever my goal may be, right? And friendships, like so I say, I think in the friendship category, I'm quite good. I do spend time with my friends. I do invest in my friends. So that's important. Mental. So that's why I took a course in the Oxford course. Every year I try to do something. I learn
Mm.
something, and that's a mental goal, right? family, spending time with my son. He's now in Australia, but every week we have to call each other and talk to each other. That's the thing, and pray with him because he's not going to church. So what else? Financial. Look at your finances. Take a hard.
Mm,
Last year, I took a hard look at my finances. I
mm,
need to look at my finances. Need to look at insurance. Need to look at all these things, right? And then like where my life stage is, right? I don't have pots of gold or whatever. So you're gonna really look at your finances, how you live your life. So all these, your career, where do you want to go? What
mm,
do you want to do, right? So these are things. Then you just monitor on a monthly basis. I try to, but
mm,
I also feel like hey, something is amiss, something is not right. Then you relook and something needs to change, something needs to, improve on whatever. But if you, what gets measured gets improved, right?
mm.
So if you don't measure, then then the days are long. Lah. What was I saying again? Your days are long.
The days are long, but the years are short.
Right?
Mm,
So
yeah,
you want to go back. The time for fun, okay?
yeah.
Don't time for fun. My
Mm,
holiday, right? That's also an important part. I make sure that there is holiday, long
mm,
holiday, short holidays. That's important for my happiness, for whatever. But people also don't stop. You must stop to plan for fun,
mm,
whatever you consider fun, lah.
mm.
But you must do that. Yeah.
When do you start monitoring this wheel of life? Have you
Mm,
always have you always done it
no,
since you started
no.
working?
Not since I started working. It was when I went through a divorce and I
Mm,
realized that as much as I like to blame my ex for whatever, but anyway,
mm,
I don't want. It was because I didn't invest enough time in that relationship. I
mm,
would like to take some ownership of that. What the breakdown, to the lack of spending time, not investing in that relationship to the point that I was just looking at my career and not looking enough at my relationship. And it's like, my
mm,
goodness, I need to be able to. This is it, right? There are a lot of stories and whatever leading up to it, but I have to take where I went wrong in that relationship, and that was because I did not invest, and that was a wake up call for me.
mm. Right.
Mm.
Do you believe that everyone can have it all, but it's just through different stages of their lives?
Yes, yes, you can
Okay.
have it all, not at the
Yeah.
same time.
Mm, okay.
Okay, you can have it. No, and that's something has to give.
It's all
Something has
about
to.
timing, lah.
Yeah, so something
Yeah.
has to give. So sometimes, like right now, okay, so I'm going to spend a little bit more on my career because my son is in university. He's not
Mm,
here anymore. When he was younger, it was important when I was working at IBM. The reason I work in IBM was because it was a regional job that allowed me to work from home. So when he was growing up, I could be with him. Right. So I started my career. It wasn't a priority. I know I still, well, I still, I know I wanted to, my career goal at the time was keep job.
mm, mm,
Right,
mm,
because then he was at this growing up stage, so that was the so the wasn't into the high flying job where I had to travel. I wasn't into that, but it was more being here most of the time, right? So
mm,
that was, so you've got to look at your life stage, right?
mm,
That's why my book Life's a Stage. Understand you're at different life
mm.
stages. So right now, imagine, like those, there are some mothers, like the kids are overseas and then they're with the kids all the time anyway, and I'm like, geez, let your kid grow and you have a life of your own, right? You
Yeah.
cannot be with your kid all the time like a helicopter. I'm not
Right.
that mom.
Mm, right.
Yeah,
Okay. Different. It's all about timing in
it's
different
all about
stages
time.
of your
Yeah,
life.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now, Frida, I think that's very interesting that we talked about, filling your cup and having that spiritual connection, right? Because when I was younger, I had a former boss that told me at that time I was too young. I couldn't understand what she was saying because we tend in an agency role, you kept, just working and working. You would go into the office in
Mm,
the morning and then you leave at 12 a.m.,
mm,
because there's an event the next day. So you keep working and
yeah.
working and working. And she mentioned that, in your life, you must always have an anchor. There's
Yes.
always something that must anchor you. And for
Yes.
her, it's her faith, going to
Yes.
church, being close
Yeah.
to God. Even though she's a workaholic, right? Everyone
Right.
knows that.
Right.
But I didn't understand that. I was like, okay, anchor means what now? Like, what my work will anchor me, lah, as long as I can tick all of this today's task, 10 tasks, 10 goals,
Mhm.
all done, But as I grow older, I understand that like whatever you do, you just need an anchor.
Anchor. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the anchor
Mm,
for me, it's different for different people, and it is my faith, right? It is
mm,
my faith. I also know when I'm sort of wandering away, from
Mm,
the anchor. But at the end of the day, like I say, it is the anchor that when all else fails, when all what do you hold on to, right?
mm,
It's not your brand name, it's not your number of followers, right? That shouldn't be
yeah.
your anchor, right? So it's got to be something else that keeps you uh, on the ground, or
Mm,
down to earth,
yeah.
keeps you humble,
Keeps you in
keeps you
check. Mm,
keeps you in check, keeps it
mm,
real.
yeah. Okay. You are a strong advocate. Like, very on brand, very on point today. Someone's fixing your solar roof, right?
Yeah.
You're a strong advocate of social enterprises as
Mm,
well as sustainable development goals,
yeah.
SDGs, right?
Yeah.
What is it about these areas, Frida, that resonate with you? Why is it so important for you? And after
Okay.
talking to so many companies or so many individuals in your line of work, right?
Mm.
What is it about these areas that really spoke to you?
Okay. So let me tell you who was. Why you're suddenly Angela. Angela, she started a business. First came upon the concept of a social enterprise in
Mm,
2010, and this. Ayo, suddenly I can't. Her name's Angela. I can't. Suddenly I gotta look at the phone and remember last name now. But Angela has a social enterprise where she provides courses where a girl comes in and she's got to bring a friend who's underprivileged to do a course, right? And then the whole concept of how, yes, when you're the NGOs and charitable organizations have a place, but I like the concept that it is, you're still making money, but at the same time it's purposeful, right? So the whole concept of social enterprise. So that was the first time I heard that concept. And then, of course, then you hear about Tom's shoes, where you buy one shoe and someone gets a shoe. Actually, the first idea of so social enterprise or impact purpose business was actually the body shop, right? There was a whole idea like, the nut from this shampoo was done by the women in Africa pounding on the nut. I was like, wow. When you can do business, but and you need to be sustainable as a business, you got
mm,
to be profitable, you got to be making money so that you can continue to impact the lives and more lives in that sense. So I like that whole idea. Now, that was 2010, the whole concept of social enterprise. I was like doing some research about it. And of course, Malaysian companies started, a few more social enterprises come about, depending on the situation, right? Then after that, um, um, SDGs case. So 2019, um, I went to the CIMB Cooler Earth Summit. I was the MC for the event. I was listening to it, and I was like, it seems there's ESG, the whole direction of environmental, social, and governance, where companies have to comply, and the whole concept of SDGs. And I realized that a lot of things that people do are, has a certain, so it's SDG 5 is gender equality, right? And something that I've been talking about, but now it is now set as a goal. And why do you have to set it as a goal? Because it's good for society and it's good for business, right? So I saw and that's what social enterprises do. I'll give you an example of Batik Boutique, right?
mm,
I buy her products and all that. So I know that if I buy and it's good quality stuff, and if I pay X amount of money and I buy X amount from somewhere else, I don't know it's going to a factory, right? But this one, I know that I'm helping 6, 7 people in the process of someone making the batik, someone sewing the clothes and kind of thing. So and most of the artisans are women. So in that way, I'm really helping in gender equality. I'm helping with the SDG goal one of no poverty. There's one thing called sustainable cities and communities. So you hear about this thing. So even like the Picha is working with refugees, right?
yeah.
These are people in our midst. If they are unable to earn an income, how do they do that? So I like that concept, and I don't mind spending money knowing that my money is being used for a greater purpose and higher purpose. So the whole then SDGs sort of then link businesses. When they start doing businesses, they're thinking, okay, when I do this, yes, money is important, but along the way we're able to help in the sustainable development goals. So that got me very interested. So I love that then when you do things, you are doing things purposefully, right? So if I'm now doing my show on sustainability and everything, yeah, I would love the show to be sponsored, I want to get advertising, but more importantly, it's something that I know that I can do for the long term, because something that I'm interested in, and a lot more still needs to be done. So I'm doing my purpose in that sense. And ultimately, I hope that that continue. And a lot of companies in Malaysia don't know what it means to get on that, to understand it, or to be more purposeful when we do business. You know, what I mean, when we do things, it's good to make money. You know, but at the same time, if we, and if companies, like even if it's a Samsung phone, right? But Samsung in their business, there's one aspect that they're actually helping a certain community, whatever, right? It's just good. A Malaysian company as well, PKT Logistics, Dato Michael Teo, a good friend of mine. He would so in his warehouse, he's got this thing called Anak Bersekolah, Ibu Bekerja, ABIB. So the mothers will come in, work for a few hours, and then they will work for 4 5 hours, and then after that, and they will hire the people in the community where the warehouse is. And 12 o'clock they chow because they have to go home and cook for the kids, right? So you are doing business, you are making money, you're paying, everybody's happy, right? There, you know, but then you also, and they say they're more hardworking. He said rather sometimes he says I can work the shifts in such a way because sometimes I hire a full timer. There are moments where they're not doing work. There's nothing to be done, right? So I'm actually spending more money. He says, right now I'm actually getting them at the time where I need people and they're actually working. So it actually makes business sense as well, right? So little things like that. When you get into that mind frame, you're actually more cost effective and more profitable. And it's good branding. I mean, of course, at the day it's a good branding, and there's nothing wrong with that. And the young talent nowadays want to work for companies that are purposeful. So
Yeah.
so that's the future. So anyway, I'm just when I talk about it, I get very excited, right? There's so many angles, so many aspects, right? What is the problem in our country, right? What are some issues that we need to do that? Can business help solve this problem? If politicians can't solve the problem, can business help solve the problem?
Collectively, right? People and business together.
Yes.
Yeah, I think, do you think that there's this perception that social enterprise are not profitable enough? Or, if you want to make big profits, your bottom line is hefty and everyone's happy with, shareholders are all happy, you cannot be a social enterprise?
Not true. You know, I mean, like for example, if you look at Body Shop, right? I mean, it's still the core of what, although Anita Roddick sold the business, but the core of what they do is still about that, right? So
Yeah.
you can still be profitable. Tom's Shoes is also profitable. Even a company like Patagonia, right? They are very purposeful in whatever they're doing, right? And they are profitable too, right? So there's nothing wrong with money. I think people have to, and then when people go and start social enterprises, they have to stop thinking like charity.
Yeah.
That you still have to think of it like a business. Your product still has to be good. All the elements of a business is still good. But if along the way, for example, like Amy from Batik, but this is so much easy if I just promote Batik and I get it done in a factory, right? That
Yeah.
kind of thing. But she says that's not the purpose. The purpose is to help other people, right? But that's, so you can be. I know she's profitable. I know a few other social enterprises are profitable, and I want them to be very profitable and making lots of money, because then that means more artisans are getting employment, right, and being able to feed their families, right? So yeah, you can be. I think we have to step away from that. Then you're thinking NGO, you're thinking I'm a charity organization. No, it is a business, right?
Yeah. Okay. Now I know that you're working on several projects, but do you have a dream project? Are you already working on your dream projects, right? Dream projects or people that you would love to work with in the future. It can be the current projects you are working on
Yeah.
already. Yeah.
I mean, like the shows that I'm doing, what's to stop it from being a global show, right? What's this, like, you can, with that, you can always, thanks to the internet, you can now interview people from anywhere in the world if they're willing
Yes.
to come on,
Yeah.
right? So you can be, so these are things that I want to push. And then, of course, we start with Malaysians or people in Malaysia. And then, of course, why not? Why not make it global, right? The world is your oyster. It's, like I say, it's changed so much, right? You don't have to be tied up to a stage. Everything's so sophisticated right now. What we're
That's
doing
right.
is so
Yeah.
sophisticated, right? So I mean, who 5 years ago it wasn't even like that. Don't talk
Yeah.
so far, right? 5 years ago we had Skype, but we had like people weren't using it, but now people are realizing the wonders of what you can do, right?
Yeah. Before we started this chat, when we were chatting and getting all our gear set up and all that, you showed me the book that you were reading, or you're reading now. Now,
Okay.
which book or books, right, Freda, that you have given most as a gift, or would you recommend to people the most, and why?
Okay, buy my book. Okay, no, no. Okay, so I'll on a funny note. So the book I wrote, Life's a Stage, is
Mm,
something that it talks about, being ready for every life stage, right? Whether you get married, you don't get married, whatever. Just being
mm,
prepared for every life stage. Then of course the recently launched book, How Dare They, which I wrote with five other people. That's not the point. But the book that actually woke me up was this book written by Tara Moore called Playing Big. That book really resonated with me because it just opened up my eyes about how women always play small,
mm,
right? So a couple of things and where that came from. And so that book was written by an American woman, and but the issues is like, wow, so similar. So one simple thing was what did you call it? The good girl syndrome. Okay,
mm,
the good girl syndrome is when you're in school, you pass your homework to your teacher pass you pay A plus, great effort, Frida, right? So that was the good girl syndrome. Now that when you go to the workplace, your boss is not going to say A plus, great, So if you don't speak up for the work that you've done, no one will,
mm,
right? And so and they may not note because they may not be noticeable, so you've got to put it out there. This is what I've done, this is how I've done it, and not be so shy about it. So I'm looking at it as, I thought it was a very Asian thing. I guess not, it's a very woman's thing, right?
mm,
So to me that was one of the things, like, oh yeah, my goodness, the good girl syndrome. Words we use like sorry, sorry to interrupt, excuse me,
mm,
so like the apology before we start
mm,
talking, right? And you realize that you don't have to be, it doesn't mean you're forceful just because you don't use those words, right? For example, I think we need to change the marketing budget. No, the marketing budget needs to change. It's not enough or whatever, right? So I'm still saying it. I'm saying it with firmness. I'm not being rude, but the way we talk, right?
mm,
Uh, it's like, wow, I just thought it was Asians. No, it's a global thing. And so
mm,
but that book like sort of woke me up to like, am I playing big? Right?
mm,
And if you what's stopping you from playing big? Are you worried what people will say? People are gonna say things about you anyway,
mm.
right? So
Yeah,
long as you know that you're not being offensive on purpose or whatever, we've got to speak up.
yeah. But you've worked with many women, you've spoken to many women. Why do you think women are like, why are we like this?
It's conditioning, right? It's
Mm,
conditioning that was us, and someone just brought this up to me, right? And this is I so he said that, when you someone hands you a baby, right?
mm,
And it's a baby boy, yeah, you tend to be rougher with a baby boy.
okay.
Okay. And I was like, yeah. I was so happy when I got a boy because I could be rough with the boy. And I said, if I was a girl, I said, I hope she's not a CJ girl, that kind of thing.
Mm,
So
mm,
that was, so even that little subtle things like that, not that it's good or bad, but that's the conditioning already. So we already, so that's just a, I don't know if it's a plus of, but the way we already have these sort of like stereotypes,
mm,
unconditionally, unconsciously, we're doing it already,
mm.
right? You, if it's
Yeah.
a baby girl, you be most, you be more gentle with the girl. With a boy, you can be a bit rougher.
That's so interesting because someone once said, right, she was pregnant during, this year is the year of the tiger, right, in Chinese zodiac. Yeah.
Yes.
So her baby was born this year.
Mm.
And she was like, when I found out I was pregnant and that I would deliver during the year of the tiger, right, I wish that it was a boy. Then I was like, why? Because if it's a girl, right, then the girl will be very fierce because it's the year of the tiger. And I'm like, but what's wrong if the girl
The girl
is
is fierce,
fierce?
right?
I mean, like,
So,
she can handle herself in this world, right?
right.
Yeah. So I thought
So
it was a very, very weird thing to say. But then again, I was like, if she can think like this,
right.
how about others? Right? I'm sure
Yes.
others will be thinking
Yes.
that way too.
So these
Yeah.
were the little subtle things, I'll tell you this as well. And I said, I said out loud, and I told people, I said, I called myself out, and I said, this is
Uh-huh.
something where, for example, in the workplace, right, a woman gets a job. Okay, two people lose a job, right? And then, or whatever, the guy loses a job between the guy and the girl. And I said, oh, and then you say, it's okay lah. I said, no, I said, she's married to a rich man anyway.
Mm,
Frida, did you just say that?
mm,
You wouldn't say that the other if it was a guy.
mm,
She's married to,
mm,
you know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. So it's just
mm,
like, wow, this is the conditioning. I was like, oh, did I just say that out loud? Why does it matter who she's married to and everything, right? When we talk about independence, and yet we already put that thinking when it's a woman, right? So
mm.
sometimes you just have to call yourself out when you realize you say stupid things like me.
I think it's just what's happening in the world and the world that
Yeah.
we're living in and the environment, right? And the things, all these situations. Yeah. Okay. But on topics of books,
Mm,
Frida,
mm,
you've written 7 books, right?
mm-hmm.
What inspired you to start writing books? Why books? And what was the inspiration behind your first book? And
Okay.
then you got your momentum, right? And from one to
Okay.
seven.
Yeah, in some momentum, some accidentally, different reasons. So I think like for me, someone said you can never write a book, Frida, was the first reasons. Then
Why? What was the context to that conversation?
I tell you, this was a very strange. This was a dream building. There's a went for an event. It was a dream building session. Can you imagine a dream building session? What's your dream, Frida? How to write a book? You got to be kidding, Frida. A dream building session. I was like, thank you.
Was this a friend or was this an acquaintance? Just someone that you didn't know? Oh, okay.
Mm. I mean, sort of know me but don't know me, the kind of thing. It's like, okay, fine. Let me, and people probably laugh at you in the first book, but 7 books later, they can't laugh at you, lah. Right? Anyway, and I don't mean to be obnoxious, but the first inspiration, but also the reason I wrote the first book was because it was that transition, having worked in Edelman, working in PR, right? And then trying to help clients to get their story out there, and then interviewing these people when I was in BFM, like all these businesses and all that, and then they're so shy to speak. This was 10 years ago, when they are so afraid to speak, or so afraid to be boastful, or so afraid people will know their business, and everything's on the internet anyway, right? So we are not very good at storytelling, and that's what the basic of the book was, that you've got to learn to promote yourself, and came from a business perspective. The reason I wrote it, right, just having been on both sides, that was the inspiration in the first one. Along the way, then you tie it with friends. Each one has a story, but you tie it with a friend to write my book, Shake and Spear Your Business. I wrote it with Kristan. Maybe the last the book before the current book, Life's a Stage, that has an interesting story because that was written during the pandemic. Nothing to do, and you're like, okay. And I had I didn't know whether it was going to get published. So I'm just going to write a book about my life, what I've learned in the many years I've been around, right? So I decided what are the lessons I've learned in each decade of my life, and what are so it's a play on life's a stage and life stages, right? It's a play on that. And I said to myself, 1,000 words a day, if not, no Netflix. Because that's what
Such
you're
good
going to end up
motivation.
doing, right? You're going to end up doing that with an open glass of wine and then watching Netflix, and there goes the time, right? So it's like, okay, note to self, 1,000 words a day before I can watch anything. So I cannot watch that. I have to write, and then I reward myself by watching something on Netflix. So then that was, and after that I wrote to, what I like was like, well, I mean, what was okay. So I'm not going to send to my previous publishers. I want to send to someone in Singapore. So I sent it to Marshall Cavendish in Singapore. They say send a chapter, so they don't know who I am. And I just shared all the information about myself and said, okay, we're interested in publishing. So I wanted to, like, beyond Malaysia, lah, where people might know me, right? Just like Singapore a bit further, still another country, and just experiment. And they said, okay, we're going to publish. So that was, to me, was just an interesting exercise during the pandemic, how you can be productive during the pandemic. If you set little goals for yourself. No reward. Must work first, then get reward.
Was the thinking behind sending it to a Singaporean publisher was because you didn't want Malaysian publishers knowing for them to, because it's you and they know
Yes,
you,
yes, yes,
so it's because
yes. There
it's
is a
written by
test of
Frida.
it's a test of whether the
It's a test on merit.
writing good or not. Really
Okay.
good or not. Or they just saying it because Freda Liu. So maybe we can sell it a little bit of that. So I just want to, like, let me just go on fresh ground on that
So it's
basis.
a test on your merit as well, in
Yeah,
a way.
yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Mm.
Yeah, it's good that you still have that groundedness. Or okay, I want to see, like, take off all the blinders and let's see.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Now I want to go global, right? And we'll see.
for sure. Yeah, with all the projects you're working on, I'm sure. What would your advice be for younger folks who want to venture into communications? Like you've done, you're a full-on communicator. You've done
Okay.
full circle, right? Those who want to go into communications or journalism, what would your advice be for them? So, for instance, is it important for people to take a degree in journalism? Is it important for people to take a degree in mass comm for them to be a journalist or to go into any sort of communications?
Okay, this is mummy advice. I can put on mummy hat. No, I find that every education is not wasted. You understand the basis, you understand the basics of what needs to be done. I didn't do a degree in journalism, but it was just. But what has stood. But you understand the fundamentals, right? You understand writing a news release, so you understand then because the news release will be written from a PR person's perspective, and of course, but even then you understand that basic, right? I would say yes. Always the education doesn't end upon graduation. You've always got to be curious, you've always got to be interested, you've always got to be willing to learn. I think that at the end of the day, right? So like sometimes we hire people within BFM as well, purposely not from that background, right? Not from journalism, but there could be, I don't know, a finance graduate or whatever, or maybe not finance, something else completely different, right? A lawyer, we hired a lawyer, but be curious and willing to learn, and then that person can see some things from a legal perspective or whatever, right? But willing to learn, right? And having a curious mind. And of course you can even start experimenting, like I say, whether it's TikTok or Instagram, whatever, you can start experimenting, getting on your own platform, whether it's a visual thing, right? If it's a written thing, just putting it out there and just finding your groove. But always be, I think, willing to learn and get comfortable with new mediums, right? Get new mediums. So I would say like I've pretty much covered every medium lah, right? And it's just like, what's the next medium? Okay
Even
lah,
TikTok?
TikTok. Not aggressive in TikTok yet, but that's also another medium. That's the way. It's the future. You can't say I don't like it, because that's the way the future. That's where the younger generation is going. So if you're going to continue to be relevant, you got to go where your audience is, right? You don't have to be dancey. There's a way of doing it that's more entertaining. But I like my LinkedIn now. My LinkedIn is my space, I feel.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you could describe yourself in a nutshell, what you do, how would you describe yourself? You do so much, right? How would you describe yourself?
I say communicator, a story, the working with storytellers, the storyteller for the storyteller. I don't know, maybe at the
A
story. I like it.
storyteller for the
The
storyteller.
storyteller for the storyteller.
Nice. I like that.
Maybe okay. I like it.
The
No.
storyteller for the
So once somebody did LinkedIn did a chat GPT of Freda Liu, right? Um, engaging minds, inspiring change. I love it.
Nice.
I love that too.
Engaging minds, inspiring change. Nice. Nice. Very nice. Freda, this has been so lovely. I look forward to all the amazing things that you have down the line. We've got The Shift, Triple Shot, Act 2. You also contribute on BFM. You are still moderate, you still MC, you still train. You have your 7 books. Please tell the audience, where can they get your books? Where can they find you on your social media?
Okay, so the best thing to connect with me, I mean, my website, fredaliu.com. Best way to connect with me is on LinkedIn. I find that that's the right space. My books, just, check out How Dare They or Life's a Stage. You can find that. How Dare They, I think it's being sold at the Borders and a few other places, but just buy online, right? I mean, who's got time to do all these things now? So you can find that online. And just connect with me. I'd love to hear from you and your thoughts as well. And that's it. Engaging minds, inspiring
change. Thank you so much, Freda.
Thank you.
Yeah, we've wanted to have you on the show for so long and you said yes. Thank you so much.
Such a pleasure.